They called it a community, but for Jeremiah Tate, it felt more like a slow siege. His ranch sat on the edge of a sprawling suburban development governed by an HOA that wore its authority like a badge, and sometimes like a weapon. Jeremiah was a quiet man, a retired firefighter with hands calloused from decades of service and a heart still burning with the kind of dignity that doesn't ask for permission. His land had been in the family for generations, passed down from a grandfather who had once tilled the soil with pride even when the world around him refused to see his worth. But lately, the soil felt less sacred. The mailbox was the first casualty. It started with a dent, then a crack. Then one morning, Jeremiah walked out to find the entire post snapped in half, tire tracks etched into the gravel like a signature. He replaced it, again and again. Each time, the damage grew more. Deliberate. Neighbors whispered that the HOA patrol, unofficial cops, in pickup trucks with flashing lights and inflated egos, had taken issue with Jeremiah's refusal to conform. His fence was too rustic, his grass too wild, his skin too black. They never said it outright, of course. Discrimination rarely wears its name on its sleeve. But it shows up in patterns, in silence, in the way they looked past him at meetings, or how his complaints about the mailbox were met with shrugs and smirks. Jeremiah didn't want to fight. He wanted peace. But peace, he'd learned, sometimes needs to be built with steel. So he did. What any man with a legacy to protect would do. He got creative. He spent weeks designing a mailbox that wasn't just functional, but symbolic. It looked ordinary from a distance, but beneath the surface, it was fortified with reinforced concrete and steel plating, a monument disguised as a mailbox, a quiet act of resistance. He installed it one evening under the fading sun, the same way his grandfather used to plant crops, deliberate, reverent, and without apology. The next morning, the HOA patrol came, rumbling down the road as they always did. Jeremiah watched from his porch, coffee in hand, eyes steady. The truck veered slightly, as if drawn by habit, and then impact. A crunch of metal, a burst of dust. The truck jolted, its front bumper crumpling like paper against the immovable force of Jeremiah's creation. The patrolman stumbled out, dazed and furious, but the mailbox stood untouched, unbothered, unmoved. Jeremiah didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Word spread quickly. Some neighbors laughed, others clutched their pearls. The HOA called it vandalism. Jeremiah called it protection. They threatened fines. He cited property rights. They sent letters. He sent silence. But beneath the surface, something deeper was shifting. For years, Jeremiah had been treated like an outsider in a place he'd called home longer than most of them had been alive. But now, his quiet defiance had become a story, a symbol. Young black kids in the neighborhood started stopping by, asking questions, listening to his stories. They saw in him not just a man with a mailbox, but a man who refused to be erased. The mailbox became a kind of pilgrimage site. People took photos, left notes. One woman, a teacher from the nearby school, brought her students to learn about civil disobedience in modern form. Jeremiah chuckled at that. He hadn't set out to teach. But maybe the land was still fertile after all. Maybe dignity, once planted, could grow in unexpected ways. The HOA wasn't done. They tried to escalate, called in county inspectors, claimed the mailbox was a hazard. But each time, Jeremiah met them with paperwork, precedent, and the kind of calm that unnerved those used to fear. He knew the law, he knew his rights. More importantly, he knew his worth. And that they couldn't bulldoze. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned the color of old fire, Jeremiah sat with his grandson, Malik, on the porch. Malik was 10, curious and full of questions. "Why do they hate your mailbox so much?" he asked. Jeremiah smiled, slow and tired. "It's not the mailbox, son. It's what it stands for. It's a reminder that we're still here, that we don't bend easy." Malik nodded, absorbing the weight of that truth. He'd already seen enough to understand that being black in America meant learning to read between the lines, to see the difference between law and justice, between silence and peace. But in his grandfather's eyes, he saw something else: pride. Not the loud kind, the rooted kind, the kind that survives storms. Months passed. The mailbox remained. The patrol trucks kept their distance. The HOA meetings grew quieter. Jeremiah kept living, planting, teaching. And in that small corner of the world, something began to shift. Not because the system changed, but because one man refused to be broken by it. This story isn't about a mailbox. It's about legacy, about the quiet battles fought on porches and gravel roads. It's about the dignity of a man who chose steel over surrender and the ripple effect of resistance. Jeremiah Tate didn't march in the streets or shout into microphones. He built, he endured. And in doing so, he reminded a community and a country that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's welded into the ground, standing firm against the weight of oppression. And maybe that's the lesson, that in a world eager to erase, to flatten, to conform, the act of standing tall, even as a mailbox, is revolutionary. That pride doesn't need permission. That courage can be quiet. And that dignity, once planted, grows roots too deep to be run over.